Okay, today we're going to be talking about the contract deadlines and when your buyer is at risk at losing his deposit, because the contracts are outfitted with specific timelines, and those timelines must be adhered to. So I am going to bring up a contract, and we're just going to go through it, and we're going to see those points at which a buyer might lose his deposits. So let me just bring this up. And I'm just going to bring up any contract. Okay. Just for ease, I'm going to bring up the contract that I just did some work with. It's a business purchase agreement. So this will actually serve two purposes. You'll see how a business purchase agreement looks and how it's similar to a residential real estate contract. And you'll see how the timelines are pretty much the same, and the risk of losing deposits is the same, no matter if you're selling a residential single family residence, a business, or a commercial piece of property. So let me go ahead and share. Hi, Day. Okay, here we
Hey,
go.
Bobbi.
Hi there.
Monica and Samaji.
Okay, I'm sharing my screen. You should see a contract. Is that what you see?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'm just going to go down. So in a business purchase contract, you still have the agency disclosure, just like you do with the packet for a residential contract. And we're just going to start at the top. Business purchase agreement, joint escrow instructions. So we're going to scroll down to where we first start seeing timelines. That starts... actually, it starts up here at the top. So the first timeline is, it should have to do with the deposit. Okay, so this was an all cash offer. So the first timeline we ran into is the buyer shall, within 3 days after acceptance, deliver to seller such verification. So the verification of their proof of funds is needed to be to the seller within 3 days. So let's say that the buyer within the 3 days did not get over to the seller verification of their proof of funds. What the seller can then do, and we'll scroll down into the contract where it talks about this, is they can send over a notice for the buyer to perform. And this actually goes with any timeline in your contract. This is the standard procedure, and this is most all contracts. I'm not going to say every single one, but every one that I've run across works the same way. So we're in section 25D, notice to buyer or seller to perform. The notice to for buyer to perform or seller to perform shall, number one, be in writing. Number two, be signed by the applicable buyer or seller. And three, give the other party at least 2, and we can change this. This is something that when you're writing the contract, whether you're the buyer or the seller side, if you're the seller side, then you could definitely counter with a different number of days. But the contract defaults to at least 2 days after delivery or until the time specified in the applicable paragraph, whichever occurs last, to take the applicable action. The notice to buyer to perform or notice to seller to perform may not be delivered any earlier than 2 days prior to the expiration of the applicable time for the other party to remove a contingency or cancel the agreement or meet an obligation specified in paragraph 25. So let's say it's 3 days has gone by, the seller's still, tapping his foot, waiting for that proof of funds to come over. It never comes. So the seller can put together a notice for buyer to perform, demanding that the buyer send over that proof of funds. Now, if you notice this sentence here says, give the party at least 2 days after delivery or until the time specified in the applicable paragraph, whichever occurs last. So what the seller could do is, if the seller didn't want to waste any time and was concerned that he may not get that proof of funds, maybe there's a lot of offers on the table and he doesn't want to waste time. So he's going to send the notice to perform after day 1, right? So that gives the 2 days for the notice to perform. Those are the 2 days prior to when that document is due. So this can be sent after day 1 and can demand that the buyer send proof of funds to the seller on day 3. What that does, if you send it 2 days in advance of the due date, that allows your seller to immediately cancel. So if on day 3 there's no proof of funds, then the seller can immediately cancel. If you wait till day 3, then you have to wait until day 5 before the seller can cancel. So if you have a concern that contingency might not be met or removed, then you can definitely send these up to 2 days early. Now,
Bobbi, when it
yeah.
says 2 days, it means calendar days or business days?
On this is calendar days.
Okay. So
Yeah.
that means a day would be counted even if it was Sunday.
Yes, it
Okay.
would be counted even if it's Sunday. However, if the day falls on a weekend, then you would push it to the next business day. So let's say the offer was made on a Friday. Well, then that would put it let's say the offer was made on a Thursday. Then the 3 days would be Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
Would
So
actually be Monday.
it would actually be Monday, because you
Okay.
can't have something that needs to happen on a weekend. You have to give it to the next day. Now that doesn't change the fact that he needed to have it on Sunday. It just means that he can have until Monday. The day is still the same, but he can deliver it on a Monday. And we can talk about that more in depth on another training. Okay, so does anyone have any other questions before I move forward?
I just had a quick question. That weekend doesn't count though, right? If somebody give you NBS and notice to perform, so we have till the day of.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah. So if, let's say that the offer was made on a Thursday. So that would make the 3rd day Friday, Saturday, Sunday. That would make the 3rd day a Sunday. That's still the day, but you're essentially given another day, because you can't, escrow office isn't open, so you can't. It's the proof of funds. So they do. You know what?
We went through this thing together, Bobbi. Remember that? That's why I'm just like trying to understand. Like
I know.
So if somebody gives you on Thursday, let's say Friday, we have a Monday 8 a.m. Remember that's what we talked about, or if so, those our weekend does count or doesn't count. That was just a situation because in our term they gave us on Monday and we have to perform on Wednesday morning,
Right.
and then it was you said, oh, we still have till 8 a.m. till tomorrow because
Right.
Monday and Tuesday and then Wednesday is a day.
Right.
So in this term, if you said Friday happens, does
Mhm.
Saturday Sunday doesn't count or it does count? Or
It does count. When you're
okay.
counting days, it does count. But if the day that it's due lands on a weekend, they have until Monday.
Oh,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
by the way, you guys, that changed. So we got the update from CAR that said if the due date for something that has to happen in your contract, like contingency removal or delivering deposit or whatever, if that date falls on
The
a
weekend.
holiday, it used to be Saturday or Sunday or a holiday, but now
Right.
Saturday is not considered a day when business is not happening. So it only applies
Okay.
now with Sunday or a holiday.
Okay. So
So
now,
if your deadline is on a Saturday, you got to do it on a Saturday.
okay. Okay. Good. Good. That's good information to know. When was that sent out?
I saw an email about it just a week ago or something like that. I
Okay.
don't remember when
Okay.
exactly.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna go ahead and search for that and send that out because that's good information. That's necessary information.
Because they basically assume, you know, you're not going to be in the office or an escrow office won't be open or
Uh,
title office won't be open, you know, you can't record anything, stuff like that. The banks are closed.
right.
So if it's a Sunday or a holiday, they automatically give you until the next day.
Right.
Otherwise, you got to do it on the day it's due.
Right. Right. Thank you, Monica.
My
That's
our focus should be like open an escrow on Monday, not
yeah.
open on Friday
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
Saturday, which I really hated it. I'm sorry, people, but if you're new or if you're not new, but just don't open on Friday or Saturday,
Yeah.
it just throws 2 days off for no reason.
I
Yeah.
know. I
Exactly.
know.
Beg other people, other agents to open on Monday morning.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's go through this contract. So in this particular contract, there are several contingencies. So that's your first, I mean, that's your first timeline. But as far as contingencies, our first one that we run into on this particular contract is in section 9. And this says seller shall, within the time specified in paragraph 25, provide to buyer or buyer's counsel, accountant, or other designated representative the list of items or documents or copies thereof checked below. So the timeline in paragraph 25, so let's hop down there. The timeline in paragraph 25 is right here. So the seller has 7 days to deliver to buyer all those reports, all that whole list. Now, this can be changed, but we just left it at the default of 7 days. And then the buyer has 17 days after acceptance to complete all of their investigations of these items. So I just want to explain right here. Let's say that the buyer, it's day 18 and the buyer has not delivered his contingency removal. Now, if seller had not done his part in number A here, if the seller didn't deliver that entire list of items, let's say he delivered all but one, maybe he didn't deliver the tax form. So let's go look at that list again. So there's quite a few things here. Down here it says federal and tax income tax returns for the years 2016 to 2021. So let's say he didn't deliver this one right here, and it's day 18. The buyer hasn't removed his contingency. Well, and the seller would like to send over a notice for buyer to perform. Well, the buyer the seller cannot do that. He can, but it won't be valid because the seller has not performed. So anytime, whether you're representing buyer or seller, anytime you want to send over a notice to perform, you must make sure that you are in 100% compliance at that date before you can send over a notice to perform on the other side. So that's just something I wanted to note here. Before you ever send out a notice to perform, make sure that your side is in 100% compliance. Everything that you were supposed to do has been done. Okay, so this is the first contingency. It's an inspection contingency. On this one, there's also a contingency for the lease. So the sale is contingent upon the buyer obtaining within 21 days after acceptance the assignment, new lease, option to extend, sublease, or other lease as indicated below. So that's another contingency right there. So you have the inspection, you have the lease, and then on this particular one, there's a franchise. So if the business is a franchise, in addition to being subject to the buyer's acceptance of the terms of the franchise as provided in Chapter 9, the sale is also contingent upon franchisor's acceptance of buyer. So they have to apply, the buyer has to apply to the franchise and get approved to transfer that franchise into their name. So this has 3 contingencies as a default. Okay, so what are the dates? The first one is 17 days, and then 21 days, and then the franchise. This has the same as the paragraph 9 stuff. So this is 17 days. So 17 and 21. So on the 17th day, let's say the buyer looked at everything. He liked what he saw, everything was delivered, and in writing, he removed the inspection contingency. Within the 15 days, he submitted his application for the new lease, but the landlord has not gotten back to him, and now it's day 21. So at this time, the buyer would need to ask the seller for an extension, because until he gets that new lease, this is still a contingency of this agreement. So what the buyer's agent would do is send over an extension to the seller asking that the buyer have more time to get the new lease in place because he's not heard back from the seller's landlord. Now, in a case like this, the seller can either accept, sign the extension, or not sign the extension. Now, of course, in this case, I wouldn't see why the seller wouldn't sign, but since that's his option, he can say, no, I do not want to extend. And if the seller does not extend, then the buyer has to make a decision. Does he want to remove this contingency without the lease in place and hope that he gets the lease, or does he want to cancel? Because those are his options. Now, it's not gonna happen right away. So let me back up. So the scenario is, it's day 21. The buyer hasn't gotten his lease. He asks for an extension. Seller says, no way, no extension. And the buyer does nothing, right? The buyer does not remove the contingency, and the buyer does not, does nothing. The seller doesn't sign the extension. So then what the seller would probably do is send over a notice to perform. Now, as long as the seller has done everything on his end that he needed to do as far as, his timelines, then he can do that. Now, at the end of 2 days, this notice for buyer to perform, if the buyer does not remove that contingency, and you can see, it's a risky thing, or cancel, then the seller can cancel. Okay. Now, let's say that the buyer got the notice to perform, didn't want to lose the business, so he went ahead and removed that contingency, even though he didn't have a lease in place. Now, let's say on day 24, he finds out that the landlord is going to raise the rent by double. So instead of $1,500 a month, he now wants the new tenant to pay $3,000 a month. Well, since the buyer has already removed the contingency, and this was the last contingency, right? Because there was 17, 17, and 21. This was the last contingency. He's removed all of his contingencies. And now he finds out that he can't afford to buy this business. So what happens? Since he's already removed all of his contingencies, he now loses his deposit. Now, let's say that he didn't remove the contingency. He did nothing. He was sent a notice to perform. He didn't perform, and the seller canceled. In that case, because he never signed this contingency, he never removed it. Now the seller was able to cancel and cancel the deal and send the buyer off, without a business. But the buyer did not lose his deposit because he never signed this 21-day contingency removal. And you see how it can be, a situation can seem like, well, of course, he should get an extension. However, the way the contract's written, if, even though it's no fault of anyone's, except for maybe the landlord's, it wasn't the buyer's fault, but he lost the business or he lost his deposit, one of the two. So these are the tricky parts of these contracts. So when you write them, if you think that you might have trouble with the landlord, it's going to be a really good idea for you to, when it says here the 21 days, because you can change this. See, there's a space right there. If you think you're going to have trouble with this landlord, that's when you want to click this box and put in another date. That way, your timelines are extended long before you open escrow. Okay, go ahead, Monica.
So if a buyer doesn't perform, they don't remove a contingency they're supposed to remove, or they don't do something that they're supposed to do, right?
Right.
And they're sent the notice to perform and they don't get it done.
Right.
I understand the notice to perform has to be sent out before the seller can actually cancel,
Right.
or even attempt to cancel.
Mm-hmm.
Because from what I'm understanding from you, as long as you haven't removed all contingencies, your deposit is safe and returnable.
Yeah.
Should the deal fall apart.
Right.
And so from a buyer's perspective, you stand a better chance of holding out and waiting to see if you can do the thing you're trying to get done.
Right.
But what's the procedure that the seller has to follow? They have to do a notice to perform and give you the time to perform.
Right.
And then if you don't, they have to do a demand to close, or can they just cancel?
They can just cancel.
So they don't have to do a demand to close. Demand to close is really just a very specific version of the notice to perform.
Well, let's say, okay, this is a good example, and Sumanji actually just went through this. His client had already removed all the contingencies, and we were still waiting on the loan. The loan was
Oh,
just taking so long that the close date came and went. The seller had no other recourse but to demand to close because those contingencies has already been removed. So if you're talking about breach of contract, that's when you use the notice to perform because you're asking them, hey, get back in compliance. You're out of compliance. The demand to close escrow is if you are in compliance, except for you have not closed. Everything's done. You just haven't closed.
okay. So being out of compliance and not having done something like releasing a contingency, it doesn't automatically mean your deposit is at risk. It
Right.
just means you're at risk of the other party canceling.
Canceling. Mm-hmm.
And at which and only if you've removed all contingencies, they can actually ask for your deposit or even a portion
Correct.
of it.
Yeah, correct. Now,
Okay.
like anything else in real estate, everything is negotiable. Even if you have removed all your contingencies, sometimes the seller will be gracious and
Yeah.
split the deposit. It's always good to not just rely on how it has been done in the past, but treat each and every transaction like something brand new and different, and you have the ability to possibly negotiate. Now there's been cases too where all the contingencies have not been removed and the seller feels like they have something some damages. They're entitled to some of the damages, some liquidated damages in the form of deposit. That can be negotiated too. I've been in a situation where the seller was just really put through it, and they went over and above, and the buyer had them hanging on so long, and so we split the deposit. So just remember that that's always something that's negotiable. It doesn't always have to go one certain way.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Well, that's about all the time we have today. Thank you guys for joining in. I hope that was helpful. And next week, if you have any topics that you want to hear about, just let me know and we can do whatever topic you want. Maybe we'll talk about the weekend days. I think I'd like to get more into that anyway. So, all right. Have a
Thank
good
you.
Wait, do you mean how to not work on the weekend?
I think our life starts on the weekend and then ends in the weekdays and then back again. And we thought Sunday was a good day to take a day off, and then all of a sudden, boom, it just hits you. And I was like, oh
Yeah.
shit, I gotta go back. And going back to your story, I just want to finish it that the biggest challenge or coming towards Monica, you were saying it. I think on the other side of the agent is also needs to be helpful. And if they understand you better, then it's easy for you to close a transaction. And in my term, it's supposed to be 25 days, and it turned into 45. And we paid extra money. Of course, the buyer has to pay additional $2,200 because they demand to close. But on the other note, they were like, okay, if you wanted to close, we're going to charge you this amount of money per day. And we settle with that. So it's all based on who you're dealing with it and
Yeah.
how good they are. And you've been in the business for many years, and I know that you probably encounter a few of them like that already. And I'm hoping not to encounter anymore. So
Oh, you will. You will.
I know. All right, guys. Thank you. Thank you for
All
all
right.
the knowledge. We'll appreciate it. And we'll see you guys Thursday.
Thursday.
Yeah,
Thursday.
for sure. All right.
Thanks.
Bye.
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 Bye.